Each rock type is going to have something different to offer, and it's kind of this like spice of life. And really climbing outside in general is reading the rock, and that takes a little bit longer to learn. The opportunity to travel and view the world with a different lens is a big reason to start climbing outside. My name is Nate Pakula. I am originally from the East Coast. So this is me in a couple of the different venues that I work. Initially from the East Coast, I spend now about 8 months of the year in Joshua Tree, California, and own a small guide service here. And then I spend about 4 months of the year up in Washington State, and I work as a mountaineering and an alpine guide up there. It's really nice to have that variety and kind of mix things up. But really where my passion lies is teaching people how to climb and bringing people from the gym to the outdoor for the first time. And a little bit about my background as an outdoor educator. I've done about 20 years of outdoor education. Over the course of that time, I've worked for a bunch of different organizations, a lot of them in California, and I've been able to work with a variety of different, people, learning types, different populations, different age groups, a lot of younger people, which has been really great, and had the opportunity to expose a lot of younger folks to climbing outside for the first time, which has been really cool. As I kind of transitioned away from outdoor ed, I started to go down the mountain guiding track, and climbing was kind of the first thing that I chose there as part of my progression. And so I went through the AMGA rock program and finished that in 2018. And I'm currently going through the alpine program. And that's been really enriching. It's been a great way for me to just get even better at what I do and be able to find better ways to connect people to the outdoors. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to climb outside and what the main differences are between climbing indoors and climbing outdoors. We'll talk about why it's worth trying to climb outside and making that jump to outdoor climbing. We'll talk a little bit about some different ways that you can get involved climbing outside. We'll talk about some cragging etiquette. And these are things that I wish I knew when I started climbing outside. These will be great tips for making sure that you don't look like a total newbie when you're out there and that you look like you're doing it correctly. So we'll talk a little bit about some ways to stay safe out there and some of the gear that I wish I had picked up earlier in my climbing career. So this is me in Railay Beach on the Phra Nang Peninsula in southern Thailand. This is one of the places that outdoor climbing has taken me. I fell in love with this place the first time that I went in 2011 and ended up going back 4 more times. And each time I went a little bit longer and I got involved in the local community there. And it was a great enriching experience that really, it kind of like captured me as far as, what's possible when you're climbing outside. It was my first international trip. I fell in love with the scenery there and the way of life and what you could get done in a single climbing trip. Over the course of those 4 or so trips that I took, I started to develop some routes there. I started to rebolt some of the routes that had old bolts or retired bolts and tried to plug myself in a little bit more to that local climbing scene, which was really awesome. And, through that, I met other people that lived in other parts of the world. And I then ended up meeting up with them in places like Mexico or Canada or Patagonia. So the international climbing community is one that really has been a way for me to connect with people all over the place. And it's kind of funny how you run into the same people. This is a picture of the Fitzroy Massif, which is in Patagonia, the southern region of Argentina. My second climbing trip internationally was down here. And this is really where I fell in love with alpine climbing. And that was a really big jumping off point for me as far as progressing as an outdoor climber, learning how to do more multi-pitch climbing, climbing bigger peaks and bigger mountains. And I just kind of fell in love with the scenery, being out there and being able to just kind of access areas that are really hard to access otherwise. So you really can't enjoy these areas without the outdoor climbing skills that I've acquired through all these years of climbing. These last 2 slides are of a trip I took in 2014, and this is to the Circumvent Climables, which is up in northern Canada. It's about 30 hours north of Seattle, just to give you some context for how far north it is. We drove all the way to a lake that was about 100 miles from this range, and then we actually got flown in via float plane for the last 100 miles or so, and landed on another little alpine lake and then hiked up to the Cirque from there. And we climbed this route. It's called the Lotus Flower Tower. I was up there with 3 of my really good climbing buddies, and we climbed this thing in 2 parties of 2. It's grade 5, 511 route that covers all different styles of climbing, from chimney climbing to face climbing to crack climbing to, beautiful roof climbing. And this was one of those objectives that I had in mind for so long when I started climbing outside, and I never thought it was really possible until I climbed enough and acquired the skills to really feel comfortable doing something like this. So in a lot of ways, this particular trip was the culmination of a lot of the skills that I had learned previous to that. And so I continue to seek out opportunities to climb in remote, beautiful places like this. We're going to start at the basics today, but I like to dream big, and I really enjoy hearing what other people are interested in doing with their outdoor climbing skills and their outdoor climbing goals. Some of this might be a review for folks, but I'm just going to outline some of the key differences between indoor climbing and outdoor climbing. Indoor climbing, you'll notice that inside the routes they're varied. They change pretty often. There are route setters that will routinely switch which holes go where to create new routes. The routes tend to be a little bit steeper as well. So you'll have either vertical walls or you'll have maybe overhanging walls as well. A lot of the routes and holds in gyms are color coded. So the coloring will tell you kind of where to go and which holds are on which route. So they're kind of, these obvious paths as to where to go. Climbing inside, you'll notice that all the floors are padded. There are these like resin materials on the floor and big, thick padding. So if you were to fall bouldering or have a rough fall or a landing coming down off of a rope, that's there to kind of keep you safe. And that usually exists throughout the entire gym. In the gym, you need a certification, usually through that gym, to belay, whether it's lead belaying or top rope belaying. So certain activities you need a certain certification for, and those are typically carried from one gym to the next, but they're pretty similar. The social aspect of climbing inside is, maybe a little bit different than climbing outside. A lot of people there. It tends to be really crowded at times, which can be great. It can be a great time and place to meet other people that want to go climbing. I've met a lot of great folks and a lot of great friends now that I have at the climbing gym. And then lastly, the gear that you need is a little bit different when you're climbing inside. So climbing inside, you really just need climbing shoes, harness, belay device, and maybe sometimes a rope, but oftentimes there are ropes that are provided for you. So it's kind of an overview of what you find inside the gym. That should be a review for folks who have climbed in the gym before. Climbing outside is a little bit different. So some key differences between climbing inside and outside is that the climbing routes don't really change. They're established on sections of rock that link up different natural features. So it might be a crack, and then some face climbing holds, and then maybe a chunk of low angle slab that all stitch together one particular climbing route. The pioneers of these different areas, the folks who first went to those areas, established these routes and may have added bolts to the routes to be forms of protection. They may have just told you kind of which crack you want to put gear into, but more or less, these climbs have been established on a certain chunk of rock. However, there's a lot more freedom as far as movement goes. So there aren't colored holds. There's not really anything telling you exactly where you can or can put your feet or your hands. So you're able to kind of use a little bit more of the terrain to get up the wall. Another key difference is outside, there are some styles that are really hard to recreate in the gym. So some of those include slab climbing, which we have a lot of here in Joshua Tree, which is an amazing type of climbing. We're kind of climbing this low angle rock, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but you're just really using your feet to climb up the wall. Super cool. Face climbing, which is a little bit, similar to what you find in the gym, but you'll find features that are, again, hard to emulate inside the gym. And then crack climbing is another style that is, found in the gym, but is fairly limited as far as what you can practice in there. There are many different types of rock. So inside, you just have the wooden walls and plastic holds. Outside, you have limestone crags, which tend to have more featured, kind of sharper holds. You have granite, which you can tend to find more crack climbing, more slab climbing on. You have sandstone, which tends to be kind of softer rock and has a lot more of these sort of chicken head features. Each rock type is going to have something different to offer, and it's kind of this like spice of life. I really enjoy going to a new area to go climbing because I might get to experience a new type of rock, and it might feel completely different from the rock climbing that I know here in Josh Tree, for instance. A couple more things that are sort of different about climbing outside. You tend to get better views. You have more fresh air. There are more opportunities to get to places where you don't see as many people if that's the experience that you're looking for. Especially in Josh Tree, there are tons of crags that really spread out. And if you walk even just 5 or 10 minutes, you might be able to get to an area where nobody else is. While there are outdoor crags that you can count on meeting other people at, you can also find solitude if that's something that you're looking for when you're climbing outside. There's no belay certification outside. So unlike the gym, when you climb outside, you have to have those skills or need to acquire those skills from, a couple of different ways that we'll talk about, but there's not going to be anyone double checking you other than you and your partner. So no gym staff or anything that doesn't exist outside. We'll talk a little bit more about ways that you can gain some knowledge as you're climbing outside. And then the last couple things, there are more ways to kind of advance your skills as an outdoor climber. In the gym, the activities are kind of limited to bouldering, top rope climbing, and lead climbing. And outside, like I was talking about before in those photos of different places that I've climbed, you can really, sky's the limit. You can learn how to multi-pitch climb. You can learn how to build anchors. You can learn how to aid climb. You can learn how to do some alpine climbing up in the mountains and do these really cool long routes. And so that's kind of what grabbed me when I started climbing outside, is trying to figure out how I could advance my skills so I can do these bigger objectives. That's what I was really excited about, and still am really excited about. And then the gear is going to be a little bit different. We'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the pieces of gear that I wish I knew about, I'll talk about, and can be really helpful to have a really successful experience outside. The one key piece of gear that I think is pretty different between climbing inside and outside is a helmet. When you're climbing outside, you're climbing on actual rock that changes. What I mean by that is if you're in an area that sees a lot of snow every year, and maybe that snow melts and then refreezes, you'll have pieces of rock that will loosen up over time. So while big rock fall is pretty unlikely, there is the potential for small rocks to come down, and a great way to protect yourself outside, and really a must, is having a helmet. So that's one of the first pieces of gear that I tell people to buy when they start climbing outside. So why transition to the outdoors? I've talked a little bit about this already, but I'm going to dive into my first experience climbing outside. I went to college in Vermont. I was involved in the outdoor programs there, which was a great, enriching experience. One of the things that they offered was rock climbing outside. And I was taken by a couple of friends that had some formal training and went out to a crag that had some really fun climbs that were challenging, yet I was able to get to the top and really boost my confidence climbing outside. That experience has really stuck with me, and it's something that I try and recreate for folks when I take them outside for the first time as well as a guide. I try and choose an area based on their experience level where they're going to be able to learn the skills and the movement climbing outside, but they're also going to be able to kind of push themselves a little bit and be successful. That experience has really stuck with me for a long time, and I think about that pretty much every day that I'm out there guiding. I think that, the opportunity to travel and to kind of view the world with a different lens is a big reason to start climbing outside. You'll start to look at, travel destinations a little bit differently. And even if it's driving on a road trip or, going for a long drive to visit someone, you might notice like a chunk of rock outside the window and wonder, oh, you think that thing's climbable? I start to see rock climbs in different pictures or movies or things like that. It's like a sixth sense now. It's the reason that I did a lot of the travel internationally and within the US that I did when I was in my 20s and my early 30s. And it gave me a great opportunity to just see different places. So a great excuse to go traveling. And then it gets you outside. It gets you to beautiful places that have fresh air and great views. And I mean, lots of studies that have shown that being outside is a great way to keep yourself healthy and happy and emotionally well. Climbing is a great way to kind of help foster that process. And then the last piece is new challenges and skills. And so some folks who hire me just kind of hire me to do some skills building. And that might be something like learning how to climb a crag. Crag climbing can sometimes feel like a completely different sport. And I'll talk a little bit about that more. But yeah, great way to kind of hone your skills on different types of rock. And that also kind of translates into learning how to lead, because oftentimes if you're leading, you're putting gear into cracks. So one of the types of leading that we do is called trad leading, and that's putting these camming devices inside of cracks as you're climbing up them, and they, if placed properly, can hold tons and tons of weight. And so one of the courses that I teach a lot is learning how to lead outside. Some other places where climbing outside can take you are just climbing on your own. So learning how to build anchors. And I do a lot of anchor building classes as well. This is probably the best way to jumpstart your career climbing outside in a self-sufficient manner. If you know how to build anchors well, then you'll be able to go to a lot of different areas and learn how to climb on your own. That ends up often being the most cost-effective way to do it. I get a lot of folks that just hire me for a couple of days to learn how to build anchors. And once they feel really good about that, then they can go out on their own. And then the last thing that I think is pretty cool is multi-pitch climbing. This is a great kind of stepping stone for a lot of folks getting into more alpine climbing, trying to climb longer routes. And this is where you stitch several rope lengths together. So, typical climbing rope that we use outside is 60 meters. And you've probably wondered how you climb the walls in Yosemite, like El Capitan, which are 3,000 feet tall. You basically climb until you hit a natural feature or a ledge or something like that. You'll build an anchor, you'll bring your partner up, and then you'll do the same thing again, however many times you need to get to the top. So in Josh Tree, I do a lot of multi-pitch guiding, which is super fun. And it's a great way to get really high off the ground and experience a lot of climbing. What to expect on your first time climbing outside. So climbing outside for your first time is going to look differently, or look different depending on kind of what your experience level is coming from the gym. So for a lot of people, it's really going to boil down to footwork. In Joshua Tree, we have a lot of this low angle slab climbing, and it's really about using your feet. When you're first learning this technique, the learning curve is slightly steeper than other types of climbing, because in the gym, it's kind of hard to recreate these slabby features that really don't have much to actually stand on as far as like a flat edge goes. So I typically spend a little bit of time with folks talking about how to find your balance on the slab, how to generate friction with your feet. And then that makes all the climbing so much more enjoyable. I find that on most climbs here in Josh Tree, there's a little bit of that slab climbing. So working on your footwork is one of the first things that you'll probably start doing when you climb outside, and you'll feel the difference between the friction inside and the friction outside. A couple things that I point out to folks who are climbing outside for the first time is that the grades they're just very different, and the grades are not necessarily harder. They just take into account the proficiency in the given style that you're climbing. So what I mean by that is, if you climb a 5/8 in the gym, if that's kind of your level, you can climb all the 5/8. It means that you're proficient in the style that gym has set in. And most gyms have what we call face climbing, because there are these big holes you can grab onto. There are outdoor areas where you're going to find a lot of face climbing features. And so if you go to one of those places, you might find that 5/8 is kind of right on the mark for what you know back in the gym. If you go from 5/8 climbing in the gym to 5/8 slab climbing outside, it's going to feel completely different, and it's going to feel harder at first, but once you get proficient in that style, it'll start to sync up a little bit more. Same is true for climbing cracks, climbing chimneys, all the different styles that you find outside. So it's kind of a myth that the grades are like so different. I really think that it boils down to style. And ironically, since I don't climb in the gym all that often, I often find the grades in the gym to be harder than what I can climb outside, which is the opposite of a lot of people. But because I have so much mileage climbing outside and I'm so proficient with those styles, it feels pretty natural to me. Whereas, these steep gym climbs that are things that I don't always find outside feel a lot harder. Other things you'll learn on your first time out, you'll learn how to belay. whether top rope belaying or lead belaying. If I, potentially, if it's like a guided course and I'm taking you out, for instance, I'll probably teach you how to lead belay so I can bring you up to the top of something. Either way, if you're going out with a group course or if you're, meeting up with someone to go climbing, it's good to talk about the belaying system outside, as the friction is a little bit different as well. You don't have the belay bar that you find in the gym, which creates a little bit of friction for you. So those are some subtle differences that you'll find. The knot is the same figure eight follow through knot. We use that in the gym and we use that outside as well. But I kind of refresh folks on how exactly we want folks tying in and what we're looking out for. Just to dive a little bit deeper into some of the styles that you're going to find outside. This is an example of slab climbing. Looks like the feet actually got cut off, which is okay. But really what you're doing here is you're pressing your toe box into the wall. You're lowering your heel down. You're actually just getting all of your weight on your foot as you're standing up. And you're doing that looking for these little indentations, little divots, little bumps. But really the rock looks fairly uniform. So what I talk a lot about with climbing slab and really climbing outside in general is reading the rock. And that takes a little bit longer to learn as opposed to climbing inside, because you're just looking at all the pink holds or all the blue holds. So the more mileage you get climbing outside, the more you'll be able to read the rock and read the features and figure out kind of the path of least, resistance to get to the next hold or to get to the next stance that you're trying to climb up to. So typically on your first time out, just trying to climb as much as possible is the best way to gain some mileage and start being able to read the rock a little bit better. When people hire me for an intro to rock climbing course, what I try and do is just expose them to as many different styles of climbing as possible and just have them climb as much as they can to just get a little bit of that repetition going, a little bit of that mileage going. The next style is face climbing. So we talked about this a little bit already, but this is when you have features kind of sticking out of the wall is how I like to look at it. So this is a cool little roof move that is very featured, has a lot of cool features that you can grab onto. The important thing when you're climbing outside, especially if it's steeper, is just remembering to get your feet, your weight on your feet as you're climbing up. It's pretty easy in the gym to kind of forget about that and just muscle your way up. But really climbing outside is so much about using your feet, even if the climbing is a little bit steeper. And this is me in Indian Creek. This is a classic 511 route called Scarface. And this is what we call a splitter crack. So we have a few of these in Joshua Tree, but I'd say that the sandstone areas tend to have a little bit more concentration of these, what we call splitter or like laser cut cracks. So they're cracks that have two smooth walls on either side and really very few face holding features to grab onto. So you're really just kind of wedging your feet and your hands in the crack. And it's a totally different style from maybe gym climbing or other climbing you've done outside. And I really like teaching this style of climbing. It's sort of uncomfortable at first, but once you learn how to do it well, it's really fun. And a famous late climber, Dean Potter, once said that if he has his hand jammed in a crack, he's on belay. And so the joke there is he soloed a lot and, he felt so secure with his hand jammed in a crack that he felt like he was, on belay, kind of locked into the wall there. So that's, how secure climbing a crack can feel. At first, it's going to feel really unnatural, but once you kind of have it click, it's really this incredible style of climbing. And what you find in the mountains a lot of the time are these beautiful cracks. So I think it's a great skill to kind of hone in and learn as you're starting to transition to the outdoors. The three ways that I like to kind of break it into are group courses, hiring a guide, and meetup groups. So group courses are a great option for getting involved and learning how to transition your skills from the gym to the crag. These can be great because they're an awesome way to meet other people who want to do the same thing. So you can kind of meet future climbing partners through courses like this. They tend to be higher ratio. So you might have one guide for 6 people. So you tend to get a little bit less time climbing, but you tend to get a much better deal. So these tend to be a little bit cheaper because more people are involved. And I'm actually offering one of these on April 22nd here in Joshua Tree through 57 hours, which I'll talk about at the end. But yeah, there are lots of guide companies that offer the same thing. Climbing gyms offer the same kind of thing, guide services, things like REI. The important thing if you do a group course is to make sure that your guide is qualified and certified. You want to make sure that the person running it has some formal training and they can teach you the best practices possible. More often than not, that's going to be the case, but it's worth always asking that question. Next option is a private course, so hiring a guide. So I do this course a lot. There are tons of other guides that do this as well. And you can basically hire a guide to teach you whatever you want for the day. So it might be, if you're coming in with a little more experience climbing inside and you want to learn how to lead outside, that could be a great way to spend some time with a guide. You get more focused instruction and you get more time climbing. If you're coming from the gym and you really have just climbed in the gym and want to just get experience climbing outside, that's a great venue as well, going through a guide and doing a private course, because you can just get tons and tons of climbing. The job of a guide is to maximize your time on the rock and to get you a huge value out of your day. So cost is a little bit higher, but you typically get lower ratios and you typically get more time doing the skill or the climbing that you set out there to do. The last way you can get involved that I'll talk about is meetup groups. I have a few thoughts here. The way that a lot of people get involved and find the people to climb with are through the internet, through Mountain Project, Facebook groups, Instagram, the message board or the climbing wall, for instance. This can be a great way to get involved. I do caution folks as they're using this pathway to get some timing or some time climbing outside, because it can be a highly variable experience. And what I mean by that is you may or may not get that much climbing in. You might have an awesome time and meet some great people as well. But it's really important to kind of scrutinize the people that you're trying to go climbing with. Ask a lot of questions. Ask if they've had formal training before. Ask if they've gone out with a guide before. And try and get as much info before you actually meet up with them as possible. I know of a lot of stories where people hired me because they went out with someone that they met online to go climbing, and their risk tolerance was maybe not the same. Their experience level wasn't the same, perhaps. And they got themselves into a situation that was seemingly unsafe. Just because you meet someone online and they say certain things doesn't mean that they are actually, walking their talk. So just a word of caution. I'd say, again, this can be a great way if you ask the right questions and know this person or have some frame of reference for what their experience and formal training level is. Can be a great experience. Be as scrutinous as you can when you're meeting folks to go climb and you don't really know them. What if I don't have gym experience? Can I still go outdoor rock climbing? Absolutely. So I get a lot of folks climbing outside for the first time that, are, for instance, in Joshua Tree on vacation with their family or, with their significant other or just by themselves, and they realize that that's like one of the things that they can do in this park. So I do realize that this presentation is mostly focused on going from the gym to the crag, but I do think it's worth mentioning that you can start climbing outside as well. So I have clients that I work with that have never climbed inside before. They have no interest in doing that, and they just want the experience being outside. So different strokes for everyone. And yeah, it's a great jumping off point as well if you've never climbed in the gym before. What I have pictured here are a few things that I think should be in everyone's kit when they're trying to start climbing outside on their own. I'll break some of these pieces of equipment down a little bit more, and it might seem overwhelming. Know that if you do end up doing a group course or hiring a guide, they'll provide all of these things for you. So if you need a helmet, if you need a harness, if you need a pair of climbing shoes, that is something that will be provided by those courses. I get this question a lot about shoes. Can you use your indoor shoes to climb outside? And the answer is yes. Typically, they're the same kind of rubber, unless it's like a rental shoe and it has some kind of colored rubber. It's more than likely going to be totally fine to climb outside. Climbing shoes are the type of thing that you can develop a quiver of. So like anything in life, if you get really into climbing outside, you might have an aggressive pair of climbing shoes for hard sport routes or bouldering. And you might have a comfortable pair of shoes for long multi-pitch routes, stuff like that. But the one pair of shoes that you have right now that you're climbing the gym with will totally work for you outside. Climbing ropes. This will be another thing that you'll want to pick up if you're climbing outside. Things that I wish I picked up earlier on in my outdoor climbing career are specific carabiners for specific things. So the ones that are pictured on the left that are blue actually have a steel collar on the bottom. And if you've ever climbed outside before, or even in the gym, this can sometimes happen. You might notice that after you do a belay, your hands are kind of dark and there's like this, kind of black residue on them. What that is aluminum. And I try and incorporate stainless steel parts into my climbing gear as much as I can. A lot of climbing companies are now starting to make gear that have pieces of stainless steel that it's a much harder metal and it's not going to rub off on the rope quite as much. So the two carabiners that I typically use for my master point, which is where my rope is going through at the top of the climb, are the two that are on the left. And Edelrid makes those carabiners. I believe they're called the bulletproof carabiners. They come in all different sizes and shapes. I like these particular ones for top rope climbing. Some non-bulletproof carabiners here. These are the Petzl SMD. These are kind of smaller, and these are great for clipping into bolts or attaching parts of your anchor. And if I don't have rope actively moving through those things, then I don't need to have that steel collar. Here's a couple of pieces of soft goods that I use pretty regularly when I'm climbing outside. Pictured on the left is a quad length sling. And so what that means is that if I wrap that up 4 times, it'll fit perfectly around my shoulder. So it's about 4 times the length of a loop that goes around your shoulder. And that's how we measure things a lot of the time when we're climbing outside. This is a great piece of material for building anchors on bolts. It's a great piece of material for building a 3-piece trad anchor, for instance. And it's a pretty versatile piece that you can do a lot of different things with. You'll notice I didn't actually put any prefabricated anchor systems in here like the PAS or the Petzl Connect. Those are amazing tools. I often just try and carry things with me that are fairly versatile and I can do a lot of different things with. The next thing over is this is also made by Edelrid, and this is called Aramid cord. This is a double shoulder length. So with this, I can rig up a tether for my rappel, and I can, in a pinch, I can use it as a 2-bolt anchor. I can do a lot of different things with this, and it's not going to take up a lot of weight too. So if I'm climbing the mountains, I'll bring materials that I can do a lot of different things with. The last thing on the right is called a hollow block, and this is a piece of friction hitch material. The more you start climbing outside, the more you'll see the value of this. It's a great way to back up your rappels. It's a great way to perform any light duty rescue. Yeah, going to be kind of a critical tool as you start to do more climbing outside. So these 3 things, whether you're buying it from Black Diamond or Edelrid or whatever, having a quad length material that's sewn, having a double length, and then having some kind of friction hitch material there will be super helpful. This is the belay setup that I use. You'll notice the HMS carabiner. It basically means it's hair-shaped carabiner that's designed specifically for rappelling and belaying. And this one, again, you'll notice at the top has a steel collar on it. So it's not going to dirty my rope quite as quick, and my ropes will last a lot longer. And then I'm not sponsored by Edelrid or Mammut here, but the device on the right is a Mammut tube style device. And this is a belay / rappel device because you can do both things with that. I like this one in particular because it's super light. And you'll notice where there's a little diagram of a hand. That piece is made out of stainless steel as well. So the opposite piece on the back side of this belay device is also stainless steel. So this whole unit is stainless steel. So it's not really going to rub off. That metal's not going to rub off my rope really all that much. And my ropes will stay nice and clean, which is going to make the ropes last longer and keep your hands a little bit cleaner. I always have an assisted braking device on me. There are a bunch of different manufacturers that make these. This is the Petzl Grigri. This is a pretty common one. They also have a Grigri Plus, which has some additional features. I use that occasionally, but this is kind of my go-to. I really like the way that it belays and it lowers. The important thing with all these devices is just to make sure that your rope is the correct diameter for these devices. And you'll see printed on each device is the range of the rope diameter that's appropriate for that device. I have a small lock and carabiner on this. It's a pretty bulky device by itself, so I tend to rack it on a pretty small carabiner. And then here are a couple things that I didn't buy until later in my climbing career, but I wish I had. On the left are some belay specs. Belay glasses are pretty common at this point, especially if you're belaying folks on steeper walls. I don't think I would still be a climbing guide if these weren't created and became as ubiquitous as they are, because I probably would have had like several neck surgeries at this point from craning my neck up backwards. So this is a great tool. If you haven't seen these before, it's basically two prisms that are glued to two mirrors, and they'll just invert the field of view up 90 degrees, and they'll show you exactly what's going on. If you're looking forward, it'll show you what's going on up top. And I like these particular ones because you can change your field of view from looking forward to looking up without having to take the glasses off. So really nice option there. Lots of companies make these now. You can buy a cheap pair on Amazon. This is the more expensive pair, but like I said, they're a great option, and they'll definitely save your neck over years of climbing outside. Great tool inside as well. Belay gloves. These are from Harbor Freight. These aren't anything fancy. Black Diamond, Petzl, Mammut, all these other companies will sell a specific outdoor climbing glove. But what I've noticed after buying all of those is that they really are the same as what you can buy at the hardware store. So now I just kind of buy the cheaper ones. So kind of a pro tip there. This is an easy way to keep your hands a little cleaner, and I like these leather grip gloves because you get a little bit more grip. You can have a little more control as you're lowering, and you're not worried about burning your hands as much. So if you lower something really fast, it can start to kind of give you calluses on your hands. So I tend to use gloves a lot now. So I want to talk about the importance of this particular rope. This is a static anchor rope. And this is going to be a really important tool for folks transitioning to outdoor climbing if you're going to start with top rope climbing. I think this is particularly nice to have in places like Joshua Tree, where a lot of the anchor points are spread out, and you want to bring, two cams, for instance, and a boulder that you tie off into a central master point, and, hanging off an edge, it's maybe 20 feet away from those things. So that quad length sling that I was talking about, or, you might have a cordelette that's 25 or 30 feet. It's often going to be hard to stitch all those pieces of material together and make a really nice beefy anchor point. So the static rope, this is a 100-foot version. It's usually 9.5 millimeters to 10 millimeters or so. So it's, as far as climbing ropes go, that's a pretty durable thickness. Typically, these static anchor ropes have pretty thick sheath, so they're going to be abrasion resistant. They're going to last a lot longer, and especially in places like Joshua Tree that has a lot of abrasive rock, it keeps me warm and fuzzy knowing that I have this big beefy rope pretty fully incorporated into all of my anchors that I build. So if you come out, do an anchor building class, especially here, you'll get a lot of experience using this rope. If you take the SPI course at some point down the line, which is basically the first course that a lot of guides take, it's the single pitch instructor course, which I'll be teaching starting in the fall. There's a lot of emphasis on using this rope to build your anchors, and it's an incredible tool. So I wish that I had bought one of these earlier. It's about $1 a foot, so it's about $100, and it's going to be a great value for you as you start climbing outside. You're going to look like less of a junk show as you're starting to build anchors, and you'll be able to easily construct these really nice professional looking anchors with this piece of material. This is a 9.5 millimeter climbing rope. It's pretty standard these days. As the technology of climbing ropes has changed, the diameters have gotten a little bit thinner. So more emphasis has been put on these tightly woven bundles inside of the rope, and then a really thick sheath. So what you're seeing with this rope that's pink is really just the sheath showing. The nylon fibers that are inside that you get all the strength from are actually white. Anyway, I'd say, anywhere from like 9.5 to 9.8 is a great first rope if you're going to start to top rope outside. As you start to get more into leading or multi-pitch climbing, people will start to prefer a slightly thinner rope that handles a little bit more easily, especially if you're belaying from the top. Starting to climb sport outside, having a set of quick draws, those will be really nice to add to your quiver so you can lead sport routes. And then if you're starting to climb routes that don't have bolts on them, then picking up a set of cams and starting to learn how to place those is kind of the next step for a lot of folks. And since this is sort of focused on gym to crag, I'm not going to dive super deep into the idea of leading trad, but that is a really cool skill to learn how to do, because that's what's going to advance you to multi-pitch climbing in the mountains, alpine climbing, and allow you to do these bigger objectives. So a great kind of goal to have down the line there. These are a couple of other things that I kind of wish I knew when I started climbing outside. So some cragging etiquette. The biggest thing for me is really keeping your stuff organized. What I find when I go to a lot of popular crags is that people kind of explode their bags, and there's climbing gear and food and layers and all the stuff that was in their pack just kind of yard sailed all over the base of the climbing area. This can be problematic because, if you have like a lot of food out, for instance, you might be attracting critters. It's really easy to kind of get your stuff mixed up with someone else's stuff. So, and also a lot of these crags have base areas that aren't super big. So if you can kind of keep all of your belongings right next to your backpack, or even in your backpack if you're not using them, that's a great way to kind of stay looking pro. Leave no trace. A lot of folks have probably heard of these principles. I'm not going to go super deep into LNT, but lnt.org is a great website that you can access all that information on. At the end of the day, leave no trace is about minimizing your impact, carrying all your trash out, and just being courteous to the other people that are there. Another note on, kind of sharing the crag. Oftentimes you're going to go to an outdoor climbing area and there will be ropes on everything. So I try, when I'm showing up first, to not just blanket the wall with ropes that I'm guiding with, for instance, or climbing with. I try and be as supportive and courteous to other people climbing as possible. And that's how you're really going to get to meet people and get people on your side as well, and try and meet the folks that you're going to end up climbing with. This is going to kind of vary from climbing area to climbing area, but there will be etiquette about what to do at the top of a climb if there are fixed anchors. So a lot of sport climbing areas are going to have bolted anchors, and some of them you'll be able to walk to the top of safely and clip climbing anchor to, throw it down. Others will have to lead. And there's some anchors that are more appropriate for getting lowered off than others. So, I'm not going to go super deep into this, but just kind of checking in with the local climbing organization, which most areas have, or the guidebook for that particular area or mountain project will tell you kind of what the local etiquette is with the fixed anchors that you find at the top of a lot of these cliffs. A couple of other things, if anyone's heard of the Access Fund before, 57 Hours is a partner of the Access Fund, but they're basically this nonprofit that's set up to maintain access to a lot of important climbing areas and climbing resources. One of the ways that gets jeopardized oftentimes is by parking in the wrong spot or accessing a particular climbing area the wrong way. So maybe crossing, trespassing through some private property as opposed to walking around on a trail, for instance. So that's one thing that I think about a lot when I'm accessing a new area, and I'll do some research to make sure that I'm doing it appropriately so we can maintain access to the climbing areas that mean a lot to us. That's it, your crag. It's usually fine to bring your dog to the crag. Just make sure that you're doing your job as a dog parent to make sure that your dog isn't pooping everywhere, that they're not eating other people's food, that they're not squealing at you while you're climbing. Yeah, just something that I think about a lot when I'm out there is, is it appropriate for my dog to be here? It's a lot of responsibility to have a dog, and so maybe it's better to find a dog sitter for the day you're going climbing. Maybe it's a totally appropriate place to bring your dog, and your dog will do great there. So just, again, do your research and kind of know what the needs of your dog are. Managing your human waste. So this is the type of thing that you'll also want to do a little bit of prior planning for. So if it's the type of place where there's not going to be anywhere where you can dig a cat hole and do your visits in the woods, then bringing a wag bag or some kind of pre-manufactured bag that you can poop in and carry out your waste with. It's not the most pleasant thing, but it's definitely something that will keep the crag cleaner. It will enable better access to these crags, and their entire crags have been shut down because of human waste just peppered about. So definitely just make sure you know where the bathroom is. Bring a wag bag if you need to. And the last thing I kind of think about here is just the impact that you have with sound or with noise. So a lot of people like to bring a Bluetooth speaker to the crag they're climbing at. That's totally fine. just check in with the people that are also climbing up that crag. If you're at the crag by yourself, that's a different story. You can do what kind of makes sense to you, but know that a lot of people go climbing outside to enjoy being outside and being away from some of those things. So just being courteous and asking about those things. A couple of different ways that you can get involved building your skills and climbing outside through a guided adventure or a climbing course. So joining a group course like a Gym to Crag course, I'm offering one on April 22nd. You can sign up through that on the 57 Hours website. Is a great way to just kind of get your feet wet, go climbing outside for the first time, meet a bunch of other people. You can hire a guide and do just an intro to rock climbing day. And that's a great way to just get focused instruction like I was talking about before. Anchor building and rappelling classes are a great stepping stone once you've kind of done that Gym to Crag 101, or you've done a little bit of climbing outside already. And that's a great way to advance your skills so you can start learning how to be self-sufficient up there on the rock and do a lot of the stuff on your own. Multi-pitch climbing. This is a great way to start seeing what it's like to climb these bigger routes. And if you're trying to transition some of these skills to climbing in the Alpine, this is a great way to advance those skills and build on, some of these practices that you might use further down the line. A learn to lead course is a great way to kind of get involved with the exposure to placing gear, or how to clip a bolt properly, how to position your body with the rope. I think these are really important skills to know how to do properly before you're doing it on your own. So some of those skills can be learned in the gym if you're taking a lead class in the gym, but there are certainly some outdoor specific things to think about when you're going to the crag. And then a few other things like that I offer, for instance, are self-rescue. It's a great thing to take a course on at some point in your climbing career if you're going to become an outdoor climber. So you can build a couple of tools to get out of situations when things don't exactly go perfectly. What self-rescue is it's learning how to haul, it's learning how to lower people, it's learning how to potentially rescue someone who can't help themselves. And really valuable information and something that's worth taking a course on at some point in time. And then, I do a lot of these Josh Tree Classics days where people just hire me to, go and climb the best routes or climb, their favorite style of route. If they're like crack climbing, we'll do all the crack, classic crack climbs, or if they are really into slab climbing or just like the most aesthetic climbs, we can go do that kind of thing. And then I do a lot of family climbing too. So, a family of 4, for instance, that just want to go climbing for the first time, or maybe, I get a lot of folks who they're like a climbing gym family. They all go to the gym, 2 nights a week or something like that, and they want to take some of those skills to the outside. Just a couple of offerings that I have. All those can be booked on 57 Hours, which is really cool.